Okay, greetings and welcome to another Pan African community community news broadcast. We're still playing with the name. I'm gonna have to find something a little bit snappy. I think it's the 10th. Is it the 10th? It's the 15th of October 2023. It's a jam-packed program as ever. I thought I was going to try and keep it kind of short, but there's been a lot going on in the world. I'm smiling, I'm laughing, and I'm trying to just kind of keep vibes positive because some of the stuff I've got to go through is kind of heavy as usual. Now, please bear with me. We do have some gremlins in the studio at the moment, so it's going to be me kind of like playing around with some technical issues, so they might not be as smooth as it usually is. Hopefully you can hear me, hopefully you can see me okay. My sister Yolanda's not actually here yet. Hopefully she'll join and then be able to kind of like look at comments and messages, etc. What can I say? What can I say? We should be on Facebook. We should be live on YouTube, and we should be live on Twitter. The Twitter's a new thing. I'm just going to try it for a couple more times and then make an assessment after that. But because it's a long program, I'm just going to get started. So please bear with me. Like I said, there's going to be a few gremlins as we're ironing out a few of the technical issues. Now, so the first well, as we always do, libations, the first story we're going to cover, and as I said, we're having a few technical problems, is a We Remember for the amazing, God, this is driving me crazy. Let me just do this. There we go. From the Rudolph Isley, who passed and joined the ancestors at the age of 84. Now, his smooth vocals, many of you know who are music lovers will remember tunes like Summer Breeze and That Lady. He co-wrote many of the band's biggest hits, their songs. His brother said that he passed away in his sleep, sadly. 84, as we know, is what we call a good innings, but it's a massive loss to the world, to the musical world. It's worth remembering that the band first formed in the early 1950s, and they were amongst one of the most influential bands, not just in soul music, but also in pop music. And they were very successful in shifting from gospel to Motown soul, and then later to R&B, and then starting to increase some politically motivated, what people would call funk. So we remember Rudolph Isley, who joined the ancestors at the age of 84. The next libation is for, let me just see if I can get this working, is for an elder by the name of Hughes Van Ellis. He was one of the last known living survivors of the Tulsa, what they called race massacre. That's a horrific part in African-American history. He was 102 years old when he joined the ancestors. If you remember in the term Tulsa race massacres ringing the bell, there was an amazing sci-fi drama. What was it called? The Watchmen, I think it was. It was a reimagining of the amazing comic by Alan Moore, and it really centered this narrative about the Tulsa race massacre and the bombings that took place in a way that really contemporized the issues, exactly what art is supposed to do. Now, our late elder, Ellis, was a few months old in 1921 when European mobs burnt one of the wealthiest African-American communities in the nation to the ground. They leveled around 35 blocks. It was a massacre. Because I think there was the neighborhood called Greenwood. Was home to several businesses as well, and home. This is part of the reason why they were bombed, because there was resentment about their commercial success. As many as 300 people were killed. Many of the mob were deputized and given weapons by city officials. Now, the massacre's economic impact has rippled through generations and generations of descendants who have lost businesses that were never, ever rebuilt. So this is a huge loss, this part of our living memory. And when I say it isn't our living memory, Hughes Van Ellis, and he joined the ancestors. Now this one, this story, this is I mean, we always do We Remembers, but this is a different spin on it for the first time. We've always spoken about African history. We sometimes speak about atrocities that take place during times like Ma'afa. We talk about we're talking about the Soweto uprisings. We talk about the loss of life through many different historical eras. But today I just felt that I wanted to say something about this. And this is clearly going to be sensitive for some people. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I have to be me. I can't not be me. And right now we're going through a really challenging time in the world. And there's a situation that's affecting millions of people. And it would be wrong for me to be silent on this matter. So I know this is a Pan-African program, and it's, you know, we link everything to Pan-African issues. It's got to be something that affects African people. And I don't like to change the rule, because the program would never finish if I didn't. But what I do want to remind us, if you want to understand how Africans could have been involved in this, is just giving you a little bit of history. So I'm clearly obviously talking about the atrocities and the potential genocide that we're seeing with the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And I just want to give a little bit of history for those of you who don't know, because in the picture that you can see on the screen is Joseph Chamberlain, and he was the so-called British Secretary of State for the colonies. Now, what many people don't realize is that, you know, since 1895, the place that we refer to as Kenya, in fact, now it's not Uganda specifically I want to talk about, but the place was called Kenya, was called the British East Africa Protectorate, and it was colonized by the British. And in 1903, Joseph Chamberlain, the colonial secretary I just mentioned, he proposed an area near Nairobi as a Jewish settlement under the British flag for the Zionists who wanted a homeland. And after they'd rejected the offer of Cyprus, you've got to remember, Britain, it was this horrendous colonial entity which had colonized and oppressed peoples all over the world. Now, of course, what happened was that the Zionist leader at the time, Theodore Herzl, he refused the idea. And so this, what is now referred to as the Uganda proposal, you know, didn't come to pass. And now we know that Israel was established in the land that we refer to as Palestine. But it's important to remember that this could have taken place in Africa. This could have taken place in Uganda. And what's happening now in the world is that we're seeing some traumatized people, Jewish people as well as Palestinians, you know, kind of like dying and facing atrocities. And like I said, this program's not about that. And just as a note right now, I mean, I don't do censorship as a rule. I've never done censorship, but I'm not in the mood because this topic is live, and I want us to be sensitive. So please don't put any comments for us to read out that are going to dehumanize Palestinian or Jewish people, because we just won't share them. But I just wanted to let you know that history. Some people say fear for the God or for the grace of I. You know, I mean, that could have been in East Africa, what we're seeing taking place in the world. And so we're just hoping that there'll be peace in that region. Unfortunately, with the activities of the British and American state and Western leaders, not looking like this is going to go live anytime soon.
Hi, Toyin. We have some comments from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation saying, thank you for speaking on this subject. And also he says, sorry, I should put that up there. And he also says, just imagine if Israel was established in the center of Africa.
Yeah, it would be a different discussion that we're having today. And thank you for being sensitive as well, because we don't really want to add any pain to those who are already being traumatized by this. It's affecting all of us who have felt oppression and understand the impact of apartheid and colonialism and how it still impacts on us to this very day, let alone I'm going to talk about the history of African enslavement and how that we're still being triggered and gaslit on those themes. So yes, greetings and thank you. Thank you, Sister Orlando, for joining. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Like I said, apologies because there's some technical issues that we're facing in the studio today. So it might be a bit of a bumpy ride trying to get all the slides working okay. So this is the section which really deals with African politics. And let me see if I can, this is really, yeah, so this is the section we deal with African politics. And the next story is really, let me see if the slide turns over, is one about the Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch. Now, most of you will know that we've not really had a good, we don't have a good impression of the approach Kemi Badenoch has taken to equalities in the UK. And we think that she's doing the complete opposite to dismantle progress. But she has actually now insisted that Britain is the best country in the world to be an African. And using the Tory conference as a platform, she's accused the Labour Party, because that's their opposition, of bowing to the altar of intolerance. Now, I don't want to get into a spat between two, like a neoliberal, neocolonial parties. I'm not a fan of this current iteration of Labour, and I certainly am not of the government. But Badenoch, who is, like I said, the Equalities Minister, used her podium, her space, her speech in Manchester in the conference that went a couple of weeks ago to claim that the Tory party is the only party to tell the truth on the issue of race. I'm not going to read all the stuff that she said. She talks about anti-wokeness, and that they are, that they are for a narrative that says, we must reject this idea that there's no point in trying, blah, 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 blah. But it's quite scary and triggering when you're seeing someone of African heritage actually throwing all of us under the bus because they feel that they have arrived. They have been that poster child for success. Britain is not the best country in the world for people of African heritage. I don't think I really need to reiterate that, but just because the Equalities Minister said so does not make it so. The next story is one about, and we've covered this before, it's the ongoing issue with the Labour Party refusing to do the right thing when it comes to recognising that Diane Abbott is a part of the heart of the project, that she must be given. I don't like using that term, the whip, but the whip must be restored. She must be able to stand at the next general election, because she's still out for, she's still out in the wind, she's still out the fold, and it's a bizarre scenario. I say bizarre. I mean, if you know anything about Keir Starmer and the leadership, then it probably isn't that bizarre. But the fact is that she's still being punished for something that she's apologized for and kind of retracted, is not a good sign for how a Labour government would conduct its business if it was ever to get into power. So this story is really about that there was a poll that happened just before the Labour conference, and the result came out that at least 80% of British Africans, people of African heritage, would consider how they would vote. And that means that they would think about not voting for Labour if Diane Abbott is preventing for standing. So this poll came ahead of, I think there was a protest called I Stand With Diane. This is really people just saying together, you need to make sure that by the time the general election happens, that Diane Abbott is a Labour candidate. If she's not, then we're not going to vote for you. So we'll keep an eye on this story. It's an ongoing issue. It's quite a disgusting state of affairs, but that's where we are when it comes to British politics. The next story is related in some ways, because there's a mayoral campaign taking place in London, and I mean, it's like I can't really make this stuff up. So on one hand, we see the image, and hopefully you can see that, of Natalie Campbell. And she is a CEO of an organisation. She's chancellor at the University of Westminster. And she says she's going to run for the Mayor of London as a centrist, middle-of-the-road candidate. Now, the reason why I'm saying that this is kind of like a bizarre kind of story is because Campbell failed to make the mayoral candidates shortlist for the Tories. and she was deposed by the other woman in the image. I don't know if you can see her. Her name is Susan Hall. So she's going to represent the Tory party. She takes on the baton from Sean Bailey. But Susan Hall is a straight out, well, let me just be clear here. Susan Hall has this long history of supporting racist tweets, saying Jewish people should be frightened or are frightened of Sadiq Khan. That he's turned London into Londonistan, which is really an Islamophobic trope. I think it was what's that guy, the Rivers of Fire, Enoch Powell. She's Powell, so she supported these kind of tweets. So you just need to listen to the caliber. I'm not talking about the caliber. I'm talking about the strength of her political or understanding of political issues to realize that she is not really the kind of caliber of person. And this is not something about intellectual snobbery. I'm just talking about just having decent human values. But she's not the sort of person that should ever be the mayor of London. I'm not suggesting that Sadiq Khan is perfect. Those of you who know how I feel about the moral cowardice of City Hall on issues to do with Afrophobia will know that I'm not a cheerleader. But I would say that Natalie Campbell as an alternative, as an independent, kind of like sounds odd that she would be rejected for Susan Hall, which tells you much about where British politics is right now, if that can happen. Let me go to another slide. So
I've got another comment, two comments actually. So the first one, well, they're both from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation. Will the galley be represented at the UK Reparations Conference next weekend? And then he says a comment, which is Diane Abbott will be there, and the son of Marcus Garvey.
Yes, I was going to talk about the conference later on. I'm not sure. I'm going to try and attend, but I'll explain it later. But I'm not going to be represented. I think I'm a little bit too uncompromising for these kind of panels, so I never get invited when they're organised by instruments of the state or of the state apparatus. But nonetheless, I will talk about the conference in the latter part of the programme. So thank you for raising that. I'm going to move on because the minister for the MP for Hackney is going to face a challenge if she ends up being the Labour candidate by this Nigerian-born activist who's actually the first African female Green Party candidate. Her name is Antoinette Fernandez. I'm not familiar with her, so I only know what I've read. Her story is actually the complete opposite of rags to riches that you normally hear about. Us joining British politics. Many of her peers kind of like come from that story, like I have and many others, where we're well, I'm not saying that we're rich. I'm saying that we fight to get where we are from working class roots. She's the opposite. She's the daughter of a Queen Mother of Lagos and the diplomat husband, and her father. Sorry, let me start again. Her father was said to be one of the most richest men in Africa. So she's had quite a cushioned, quite well-heeled, and privileged life. There's an interesting caveat to her story that like I said, I've only learned about this recently, thanks to our researchers. There was a time when her father was involved in a public feud, and he told his daughter that he wanted her to take his side in newspaper interviews, and on principle she refused. And she said that literally overnight she got cut off from the family fortune at the age of 31. So even though she is part of this wealthy family, because she stood up against these kind of like sort of her values and her ideas, she is no longer living that same life of privileged. And then from there, she started volunteering for the Green Party, and now she's their candidate in Hackney, and I should say Hackney North and Stoke Newington, which is really the exact same seat that our sister Diane Abbott would normally represent for Labour. So it's just, if you hear of her name, you start seeing, just so you've got a little bit of a backdrop about who she is and how she fits into what's going on. Now, the next part of the program is where we go through what we call policing matters. I should say, and just give you a reminder, you are watching the Pan African Community News broadcast. It's the 15th of October, 2023. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. We do have a few technical gremlins, so please forgive me if you see me shifting lines and all over the place while I'm trying to find out and get slides working. But we'll keep moving on and trying to make progress as the show goes on. We should also be, I should say, on Facebook. We should be on YouTube, and we should be on Twitter. So if you are on those platforms live while we're broadcasting, you are welcome to share a comment or to add a question. It's your program as well. We're just sharing the news of what's happened over the last couple of weeks. And Sister Yolanda will share it with us, and we can discuss and share them. But I'm going to keep going on. So the next story is something, again, that we've been covering for a while, and this is that of the case of Chris Kaba. Now, what can I say about this, really? I think I explained that as Legally, we have actually reached out to the police and made a complaint about their wildcat strike. And the police have come back and said that they're not going to kind of like investigate our complaint about them striking, which is actually something they're not allowed to do. We have made an appeal. The appeal has come back, and they're starting to say that they're not going to look into our complaint as well. So I think we now have to write to the next stage, a policing minister. We're not expecting there to be any recognition that what the police did when they downed tools in their strike because one of their own was facing scrutiny for taking the life of an unarmed man is something that a complaint is actionable against. Nevertheless, Legally is never really concerned about their responses. We have to always make it sure and push and push and push and make it clear that we don't accept those policies. So in this particular case, in this particular story that I'm sharing today, we now know that the Old Bailey has heard arguments for continuing the anonymity of the Metropolitan Police officer who's been charged with the murder of Chris Kaba. He's only, for legal reasons right now, being referred to as NX121. And so there are many of us who are saying that actually when you murder someone and you're a public officer, then the right to anonymity should really be suspended. We kind of need to know, have you got form? The public needs to know. But there's no decision being made, and we don't know when the decision is going to be made. We've heard comments from inquests who object to the fact that we don't know, and that this order still stays in place. So we'll keep watching this story. Like I said, there's not much to report on this, but it's worth you just recognizing that it is still ongoing. An interesting changing of the guard has taken place in police Scotland. And I suppose it's actually a positive one in many ways, because what's happened is that in her first day in the job, the new head of Police Scotland, Joe Farrell, backed the statement made earlier by her predecessor, that's Ian Livingstone, which we reported on, and confirmed that the police is still institutionally racist. Now, I know that's a very is water wet like statement, but for police officers, especially those in leadership roles, that's a very challenging thing for them to say. They've struggled to admit something that we've all known for like decades. But she said it was a difficult message. She said she was determined to drive forward an anti-discrimination agenda. She knows it's uncomfortable for the staff that she's going to be commanding. But she said that having considered the statement made by Livingstone, her predecessor, she agreed. How could she not agree that Police Scotland is institutionally discriminatory? So it's a good start, I think, to say this on day one, as soon straight into the job, and recognise that there's work to be done. Unfortunately, the Metropolitan Police is still light years behind on this. They have their race action plan, which we'll talk about in a second. In fact, let's go to that story right now. There is a national race action plan that all of the UK's police forces are supposed to be engaging with. But one of the things that come out at the annual National Black Police Association convention, which took place in Cardiff, was that it looks like the plan's been undermined by chief constables, and they're getting the support of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. So it's really, really, I mean, they're just furious, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the comments. That was the language that they were using. You know, there's been cases of like forces like Greater Manchester Police, where the top cop in charge has Stephen Watson, that's his name, has denied that racism applies or institutional racism applies to his force. And so many of these officers who are at this this conference has said that these senior officers are trying to stifle progress on the topic of anti-racism. I'll be more specific. They're stifling progress on the topic of Afrophobia, because of course we can talk about anti-racism, but often what we forget to talk about is that there's a specific type of racism that affects people of African heritage, Afrophobia. And because we're outside the EU, you don't hear the word Afrophobia that much. In the EU, they passed legislation against Afrophobia. In the UK, we have no such protection. So we do clumsy things like talking about anti-Black racism, but that has no force, no legal force, no intellectual force. We know what we mean, but it doesn't mean anything. I'm talking about in terms that we can use to get change. So yeah, this is just an update on where it stands on this police race plan. I don't have any up to date on what the Metropolitan Police is doing. I don't think there is any updates on their work. I hope I can do some research around that and bring that to you, but we'll see what happens on that.
I have a comment here from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation. British Police, racial language, IC1 White Northern European, IC2 Dark Southern European, IC3 Black, IC4 Asians, IC5 Oriental, IC6 Arab, mixed race, Middle Eastern, IC7 to 9 is unknown.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what we're seeing there is the different kind of codes that the police use to classify different ethnic groups, and they're based on racializing ideology. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Let me go to the next slide, which is that of, let me see if I can get this right. PC Ashley Akagio. My apologies if I mangled the pronunciation. I'm never good with pronunciation, so please forgive me for that. Now, PC Ashley, again, and you'd think for someone who's Yoruba that I should be able to pronounce all our names well. For PC Ashley, who was formerly attached to the Met's Violent Crime Task Force, he took a claim against the police for race-related harassment, and they basically characterized him as, believe it or not, acting aggressively, you know, and it was really ridiculous. But he won his tribunal. He won the case. He found that the characterization that they had used was an African trope. It's a racial stereotype. And he, you know, it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the comments, but you know, he'd been given this dressing down by a senior officer, a police sergeant, over his alleged poor performance and stuff. And so it's very good to see that he's actually won his case. And I mean, and this is, you know, again, just a reminder that the Metropolitan Police is continuously, in some ways, it's good that we're hearing more and more cases, and there are more and more findings against the institution. But again, it's just a reminder that until they recognize it and come out with clear acknowledgement that institutional racism is still deeply embedded in those systems, we can't have confidence in it. Okay, so that's us going through policing news in the UK. So this is the section where we start to talk about just some of the general news stories, and of that there's quite a few. So let me just prepare some of this, and I'm going to start with a story. Let me change the slide, of Tafari Thompson Minter. Now, we don't have much detail on this particular story, so I don't know really what I can share about the motives other than that someone has been charged with his murder after he was knocked off his moped. This took place in Sevenoaks Way in St. Paul's Cray. He was hit by a car. Officers, paramedics, London's air ambulance all attended, but despite their best efforts, the young teenager, passed away. Now, there was an arrest. Joseph Barnes, 40 years of age, no fixed abode, was arrested on suspicion of murder. But I don't want to say anything else because we don't have any more information on this. I'm not going to speculate. So, it's just a recognition and we remember. And, hopefully we'll hear some more on this and find out what motivated this, what are the backgrounds. I think the police are asking for more information, but we don't know if anything at this particular moment in time. The next story, we do unfortunately have a little bit more information on this one, but again, we still need more comments from those in the area, for the community, to kind of like give us a bit of a backstory on this one. Is of the passing of Hubert Brown. He's a 61-year-old elder who joined the ancestors after being stabbed. Now, there's allegations that it might have been an attack motivated by race or racism. I don't know. A woman has been charged with murder. There's been an outpouring of tributes about how lovely he was. He was a vulnerable adult, thought to be of Jamaican heritage. He was always described as being friendly, and he was very popular. I have read somewhere that sometimes he could be hard to understand because of his vulnerability, because of his challenges, but he was well loved. So, like I said, again, I don't want to speculate. I don't know. It says it's alleged that it was an attack and a murder motivated by racism. It is possible that there's something happening in the UK that that is just getting worse progressively. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Please again put out a call for any more information for people to step forward. And as we hear more information about this, of course we can share with you. After those tragic stories, I suppose it's nice to have some good news. Perhaps this is, I should have put this in the good news section, actually. My memory's starting to go. And this is the story of a railway worker of the name Asquith Xavier, who has now, our elder and ancestor, but the train had a train named after him for his work in overturning a racist recruitment policy. So, for some of you who are familiar with the history of British Africans in the UK, there was something called the Colour Bar. And our brother, our elder Xavier, now ancestor, who lived in Kent, overturned the decision not to employ him as a guard at London Euston Station because of his ethnicity in 1966. That's before I was even born. And so his contribution to dismantling the Colour Bar is now being recognised with a train named after him. And this is actually a fantastic legacy. It means that we can, it's nice. Sometimes we have statues, sometimes we have plaques. I think it's nice to have a train named after someone who did such good work to challenge racism and structural racism in British society. Not all of our civil rights leaders herald from the United States, and even though, of course, the United States is a great influence, we have to acknowledge those that come from these isles, who lived in these isles, and who felt it on these isles. For many of you, listening, you'll know that right now we are in October, and October is the month that is often referred to as Black History Month. Legally, we refer to it as African History Month. And I think Brother Kwaku does a really good presentation on the history of how it came about. I know I did some work at Hackney Museum some time ago about its history and its genesis. But it's also worth remembering that there has been resistance to African History Month in the UK since its inception, and that it hasn't fallen away. So this is the example of one London council, and it's London. It's very interesting that it's actually in London, because everyone thinks when you're outside London that London is this cosmopolitan utopia and everyone is fine and there's an increase of diversity and everyone respects it. That's not always the case, actually, because in the Conservative led London Borough of Hillingdon, this is in West London, they refuse to celebrate African History Month point out refuse. And that, even though there's been letters from the from Unison, from activists, from residents, the council's just like, we are not going to celebrate African History Month. And people are saying that, look, this could be a breach of Race Discrimination Acts, and it probably is. But the point is for us to remember is that they exist. That thinking where people refuse to acknowledge us, our presence, our struggles, and celebrate our accomplishments is still alive and kicking in 2023. So yeah, you deserve the badge of shame, Hillingdon Council, and we see you. We see you.
I was just thinking, Toyin.
Yes.
I was just thinking that maybe we should have, it might be a bit silly of me to say, but maybe we should have a little section on badge of shame for organisations. Pardon?
So I didn't hear that. A little section on what was that?
Oh, badge of shame. So for organisations or individuals who behave disgustingly or something.
You know, that's a really interesting idea, because legally, probably around 10 years ago now, we used to have a register which we called the RIO list, the Racially Insensitive Offenders list.
Yeah.
It was very successful, actually.
Yeah,
And we named
yeah.
individuals, we named organizations, and we put the evidence online for everyone to see, those who were threats to our community, who were disrespectful. And it kept us busy because people hated being on the list. Remember, Legally had a mailing list of some 10,000 people who read what we wrote, as well as our forums and our events. And so we were able to identify people. It was a badge of shame. Unfortunately, of course, social media's changed that. We don't have the same resources as we used to. And so I think it is a good idea, and it's something that could be used and should come back. But for those of you who are interested in doing stuff or want to talk about those ideas, I'm more than happy to explain how we did it and why we did it, and and give you tips on reinstating it. But the RIO list was very, very effective. I can't stress that people who were about to go on Question Time and spout nonsense, they knew the moment they opened their mouth, they'd go on the RIO list. And so we had, we had some high level complaints from rednecks across the UK. And what it did also, which is the point of Legally, was it enabled people in our community who didn't really know the history of some of these threats to our community to find it all in one place. Yeah, good idea. Good idea.
Mr. IC Black says, badge of shame, excellent idea.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's one of the things I did enjoy. It was nice just people knowing. So people like Piers Morgan would be on there. People had to know that if they open their mouth against us, there'll be someone on the internet that would never delete it, that will evidence it, put the clip up there, and it would never go away. And it didn't matter what you said, because you couldn't bully. You can't bully me. It doesn't matter. I don't really care. So we do need that back, but let's move on. One positive story that's coming out this particular month, which we referred to as African History Month, of course, is known as Black History Month, is that the Independent has actually said that it's going to give free advertising to organizations who and I think they're going to be doing this throughout the year. So it's not something that they're just going to stop at the end of October. And I think they've already given some free advertising to some organizations already. So that's actually a very good initiative, and I thought that was some good news to share there. I think I've actually missed a slide. Actually, I'm so sorry. I think I said that we got a few technical problems. Let me go back. There was another slide. There it is. Yes.
Sorry, Toyin. Sorry. Just Mr. IC3 Black Reparations says, badge of shame. Send me the details. I want to do it with the reparations news.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, well, drop me a line and I can explain kind of like what we did and hopefully that will help you to kind of like get a format of what happens. But the key thing for it, however, is not that it's just a newsletter. It does have to have a resource that anyone, and that means anyone, not just our community, anyone can access it and see the facts of what was said, exactly what was said, with an explainer of why it was Afrophobic. So it's a mixture of kind of like, you know, it's kind of like I suppose Legally was acting like a journal. But yes, it's good to know that there's someone out there who wants to keep that going. But this particular story here about Lloyd's, essentially Lloyd's of London has just said it doesn't plan to offer direct financial compensation for its role in the Ma'afa, or for enslaving, to be precise. I mean, is it surprising? Perhaps not. But on other ways, perhaps it is, because if you look at the image, I think you can see the image over there. I don't know which way it points over there. A couple of years ago, Lloyd's kind of like was making noise, like squeaking around, that actually it was going to engage in reparations. So it's an about turn, isn't it? And you've got to remember what's happening a couple of years ago, that Lloyd's of London thought that it'd make a statement that it would make reparations. And I think if you think back, that was during lockdown. That was during Black Lives Matter. That was during the murder, the lynching of our brother George Floyd. And so a lot of organizations made a lot of noise, black squares and stuff. But now a couple of years have passed, they think that they can get away with business as usual. And so for Lloyd's to turn around, I mean, it's also, just remember, it's not just Lloyd's and its insurance business. It's also the Church of England, which is another UK institution that really has to account for its involvement and its facilitation of African enslavement. It's just one of those stories that I just want you to be aware of. I mean, Lloyd's did apologize 3 years ago, though. But like I said, that was because I think of the clamour around Black Lives Matter. Let me move on. I knew I forgot a slide, so I think I've done that one already. Okay, let me talk about this particular story. Now, this is we don't really have a wind down zone like we used to have when we ran the radio program every week, and that's something I don't know how we're going to fix that one. It's just a time issue. But what I do want to say was that there was a program. Was it last week or the week before? I don't know. We watched it together, and initially I didn't want to watch it, if I'm honest with you, but I did. A White Nanny, Black Child, and it was. Let me give you the backdrop, because it's the news part of the program. It was a feature film or a documentary about the experience of people who came from Nigeria and fostered by British families, European parents, essentially. Now, this took place from 1955 to around 1995, and there's an estimated 70,000 children from West Africa who were fostered in this way. Now, somebody have used the term farming. I've never heard that term, but that's what they said. They called it farming, and I find that I don't like that term. It's kind of like there's an assertion that we're farming out, or their children. I mean, and the whole program was a bit triggering, if I'm going to be honest with you, because even though it was done, there were some really sensitive parts in there. There's some really bonding in there. I'm not sure that it was a topic that was right for TV. It is good that the history has been shared, that people know that, because I know, I have friends, family members that went through that. I know that, my own background, I know I didn't go through the extremities that many of those who went through this did, but I did have a European nanny, and it was an abusive experience. I do remember as a child, if I'm not even going to talk about that, it wasn't a nice experience. And then my dad came back and he got us and stuff. But I've been in children's home, and I've been through all of those experiences. And I had a relatively gentle experience, me and my sister, compared to those that were in the program. So it's good that this was shared. I just don't think that this was really the right format. And I also know that some of the images, some of the footage that was used in this program, I know some of the children now, I know them as adults, and they didn't get their consent. The documentary makers didn't ask permission. Now, they might have used this idea that it's out in the public domain, or it's it's BFI free to use footage, so it's we can use it. But I think that when you're talking at a topic like this, you should really reach out to those children in those videos and just make sure that they're okay. It's a very sensitive issue. But like I said, on the balance, is it good that the program's out? Is it good that our experiences are acknowledged and recognized? Well, definitely yes. I mean, on that level, I won't say it was healing, but I would say it was helpful. And one thing, the reason why there's an image of Ty there is because the program was made in his memory. And, and I don't know the links, maybe it's between the filmmakers or, but, perhaps Ty went through the same experience. He and I never spoke about that part of our childhood. Yeah, anyway, I'll move on to the next slide. In fact, the next slide is actually about the next section, which is UK Health. And just as a reminder, you are watching the Pan-African Community news program. I can never remember. I hate acronyms. I never remember acronyms. So it's the 15th of October 2023. I'm pretty sure that we're going over time. Yes, we're at 8 o'clock already, so we're going over time, and I'll try to be a bit quicker. We're just talking about the news and what's happened over the last couple of weeks. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. We should be live on Facebook. We should be live on YouTube, and we should be live on Twitter. Again, the Twitter thing is new. We'll be doing this for a couple of weeks to see how that goes. There's a couple more times. But you are welcome to make a comment to let us know you can hear us okay. Well, I know you can hear us okay because our brother IC3 is giving us commentary. So thank you for that. But just let us know if there's anything you want to say, anything you want to add. And if you are going to make any reference to the We Remember tribute that we talked to the victims of enslavement, of colonialism, of oppression, of terror, then please be sensitive. That's all I'll say on that. So this is a section dealing with UK health. And the first story that I want to touch upon is that, and it's, well, let me explain it. It's of the East London Trust. I'll be quite specific. It's actually of the Queen's Hospital in Romford, who's actually been forced to make a payout to 2 members of staff after their claims of racial discrimination were successful. It's really interesting if you read this in the newspapers, because the story that they talk about, the way they frame the story, they talk about £120,000 payout. And there's this tendency for the redneck papers, the tabloids, to talk about race discrimination claims that are successful in the language of payout, as if there's something wrong in actually seeking justice, that these are not really legitimate claims, and they're trying to kind of like rile up the British public against us securing justice and securing compensation in these cases and changes. But in this particular case, there were 2 NHS workers. One was Somali, another one I think was of South African heritage. And I'm not going to go into detail. I don't remember everything that I read, but they were being racialized. They were being treated in ways that were unfair, and they both got around 60 grand each. Which was which all I can say is good. Racism should pay and it should hurt. If we continue along this line, and I want to make the point as well that it's totally okay to love the NHS as an institution and to support it and to fight for it, and when members engage in industrial action, to believe in the principles that led to its founding and the way it works, and also to recognise that as an institution that's loved and cherished across the UK, but it's also kind of like littered with structural racism. And so what's been happening recently is that the COVID inquiry is taking place. And the staff members in the NHS from African and other minority ethnic backgrounds are saying that, look, the structural racism within the NHS is so bad that they just didn't listen to us when we raised concerns about some of the problems with the COVID PPE equipment, that they were ill-fitting, that they didn't take into account our faces and our bone structures, or all other kind of things, and so they were being left unprotected. And I don't know all the details because I haven't heard the inquiry and I haven't been able to read any kind of like transcripts from what's taking place. But this story is an important one because they're saying that someone was wearing a headscarf. There was all kinds of different minor adjustments that could be made to ensure that minoritized staff were actually protected, but they didn't listen. And so the inquiry is still ongoing, and we'll see what happens and what else we learn from that. Now, this is another story that's interesting, not just because of the story itself, but also for the way that the media has reported and responded to it. Now, this is a case of NHS Scotland actually saying we're going to begin a program of reparations, and we're going to involve Jamaica and Africa in a bid to make amends for our hospitals' involvement in slavery. And this is actually a really good development. And it's not just come out of nowhere. There was a report that was commissioned, and it found out that the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh had profited by some £40 million from African enslavement. It also found out that the hospital itself, or trust, had ownership of an enslavement camp. They call them plantations, but they're enslavement camps because it was left to the hospital in a surgeon's will in 1750. So it's good that the hospital is recognizing that it benefited and it profited from this matter, and that it's actually going to engage in trying to commit to a program of reparations. But the reason why I say it's important to recognize how it's reported on, because I've changed, we often change the headlines and that come in, because the original headline was very much about talking about how the NHS Scotland shouldn't be doing this, that it doesn't have the resources, things are scarce. Why is it dealing with this non-urgent project when there's so many other things to deal with? And it's very irritating to hear those kind of narratives. But that's the tabloids, that's the redneck racist papers. So anyway, that's that story. Another
Torian, I just wanted to say that sometimes when organizations say that they recognize their part in the enslavement of our people and that they want to make amends and whatever language they use, I just wonder who they actually speak to in terms of how they do that, in terms of what they do. Because if it's going to be, I don't know, a monetary thing or whatever it's going to be, I just want to know who it is that they're going to go and talk to about it. That's. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
no, you're making sense. Often, what happens in these things is that we don't like to admit it, but amongst the Pan-African community, and when I say Pan-African, I'm talking about those of us of African heritage in the UK. We do have a bourgeoisie, we do have an elite, and they tend to talk for all of us in these circumstances. I'm not saying in this case, I don't know who's been engaged in this process. But I certainly know across the Caribbean as well, there's an elite there that's not connected to the grassroots. I know this from personal relations. And so these people talk on our behalf and they secure money which they can benefit from. And so what happens is that the institution can say that they're engaging in reparations, but they're not. They're compensating a small elite with programs that keep them in their jobs or keep them, relevant inside their particular domains. And those of us who are living with the legacies and the brunt of enslavement, of colonialism, are left no better off. Which is why reparations can never just be a discussion about money. So that's a really good point that you made there. Thank you for sharing that. So this particular story talks about there was again another report, but this time looking at those people who are offered heart valve surgery on the NHS. Now, I don't know much about this particular condition, but apparently there's something called aortic stenosis. And it means that your heart valves, I think, narrow as a result of calcium buildup when you have this, and it stops your blood flow. And this can then lead to shortness of breath, lightheadedness, and then it can get really bad to chest pain, and that gets very dangerous. Now, what happens is that there is surgery that can relieve these symptoms and increase life expectancy and obviously improve quality of life. And it's called aortic valve replacement. But what this report found out is that those people who are, those patients who are female, who are African or Asian heritage, and especially those who were well off in the financial terms, were not offered this treatment. And so what happened is that you find that they'll be living for years, with this condition. Some will die. I mean, it's actually can be such a dangerous condition if the calcium builds up that, people die within 5 years without this operation. And that's what's taking place. So like I said, there is, our research team did share a journal paper with us. I haven't had a chance to read it, so I apologize, and I will get round to it. But this is a serious condition, and it might not affect everybody, but for those that it does affect, bearing in mind that the NHS is supposed to be free at point of contact, so if we need that kind of surgery, it doesn't make sense that that's being kind of like rationed out on ideas of race or of class or anything like this. And that's what this report to me seems to be, and gender seems to be signifying, that if you are male and you're European and you've got a bit of cash, then you're going to get an AVR surgery, which is what it's called. If you're not, if you're a woman, if you're African, if you're Asian, if you're from a working class background, you won't get it. Just live with it until it's almost life threatening. So again, I haven't got all the details. And I will read up on it. So maybe in a few weeks' time, I'll have a bit more background in my head, but I'm going to move on. So it's still sticking with, did it change? No, the slide didn't change. Oh, technology, eh? So still sticking with the theme. Let me see if this works. Does that work? And yes, okay. So this is health. And this one might seem a little bit strange. This one is about a report by CIPD, which actually reveals that at least half of what they call Gen Z workers of African heritage are still having to code switch in the workplace. They're still uncomfortable. They're still not being able to be themselves, despite all these lovely, lofty diversity commitments that we've heard from employers. The research is quite interesting because it says it's not only just those of African heritage, but those who are of African heritage and are also LGBTQ IA plus are especially affected. So what's happening is that they're having to hide who they are just to get on. Now we're quite familiar with this. There's been reports about people with direct links to their continent and their heritage, kind of like having to change their names on job applications to secure an interview and even have any chance of actually being employed or getting a job. But it's just disappointing to hear that this is still going on. I couldn't download the report. CIPD seems to be a membership program, so group, and so when I went to the website, the report wouldn't download. But that's the bullet points from the research they found. This is very new as well. They surveyed around 2,500 Gen Z. I don't use those terms. That's 16 to 25-year-olds with African heritage. Perhaps this story is also linked to that last story, if you think about it, because essentially what our sister here, her name is Keely Taverner, is actually talking about is a direct consequence, also a direct remedy for that situation. And she's saying that there's some significant barriers to African people accessing mental health support, and with many being just basically unwilling to try therapy, as they wrongly think of it as a European middle class pursuit. And so I think that if you think about us code switching and not being able to be ourselves in our working environment, and if you really consider how much time we spend in our working environment, so what harm that's doing to us, what our sister Keely is saying is correct, that we certainly need more African therapists in the UK. We just don't have that critical mass that is required, because one of the things that she's identified, and I know from personal experience, is that when we do have a good number of African therapists helping, kind of like those of us struggling with those kind of issues, people can access the mental health support system in a much more relatable way. It prevents us feeling that we're being medicalized. You know, like we are. It's some kind of I don't know what the word is. It humanizes us. We can have a therapist who understands, because they've probably gone through some aspect of what we have experienced, and maybe they've come out the other side with tactics and methods and ideas about how to survive it. So this is an interesting story. There's data from the government which was released in 2022 that said that African people are 5 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act compared to their European counterparts. And if you look back about last year, statistics were that 342 detentions for every 100,000 people were people of African heritage. While if you look at the rate for other ethnic groups, it's only 72 people for every 100,000. That's a huge disparity, 72 to 342. So we certainly need more therapists who are, got the cultural competency to actually help us and heal us. Okay, well, this is the last part of the program. With all that news, I think we try to close. Instead of the good news section, I've called it the being positive section, because sometimes we don't really have good news or positive news to share. Unfortunately, every 2 weeks, there is stuff out there. It's just difficult to access and find, and we have to prioritize the things that are often the most important to our community right now. So this is the being positive section. It's what am I going to say? It's the 15th of October, 2023. You're watching the Pan-African Community News Program. I haven't got it right first time this time. Right, I need to write it down. Why don't I put a post-it note up here, and I can just read it. So watching the Pan-African Community News Program. I'm your host, Brother Dr. Tyner Betu. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. So just before we close up, you can drop us a line, you can make a comment, you can ask a question. But I'm going to go over some of the more positive aspects of the last couple of weeks.
1 second, Tyne. I've got a message from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation. He says, I was detained under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act 1983, official diagnosis F229, persistent delusional disorder, unspecified, preoccupation with the subject of racism.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I always struggle when there's a diagnosis about people especially people of African heritage, having a preoccupation with the topic of racism, when actually we live in a society which is riddled with structural and institutional forms of racism and violence that accompanies it. So I mean, I feel honored that you would share that with us, and yeah, thank you. I don't know what else to say on that, and I'm sorry that you've had to have that experience, and just hope that you have a support system to make sure that you can keep or navigate this minefield that we live in a safe and a healthy manner. I'm going to go on and try and share some positive news, as we close the program. And this is a story about a course. It's the University of Glasgow, and they're going to host the first reparatory justice course in the UK. They're going to begin the studies pretty soon. It's a master's. It was established following a report from 2018 into University of Glasgow's historic slavery links. It looks like Scotland has been far more progressive than England. I think Wales has done something similar with not a course, but a shift to their education program. Now, this report that was issued in 2018 included a number of recommendations about reparatory justice, and it led to closer ties with the universities of West Indies. This means now that on this particular program, students will have the option of studying either in Scotland or in the Caribbean, which is quite a development. Just bearing in mind, Sister Oleander just mentioned as well there, we do have to always make sure that the right institutions, the right people are involved in these kind of programs, because what we sometimes do is that we let institutions off the hook because they think they're working with grassroots representation, and they're not. In fact, they're often the antithesis of grassroots representation. And also, just while I'm celebrating this, if that's the right term, I think we need to reflect on what's happening with Professor Hakeem Addy. I mean, it's almost, the same way they say in workplaces, one of us in and one out. We can't have two in the same time. So as we lose the master's program looking at African and African Caribbean history, we now have a repertory justice program, which is in Scotland, and one was in Chichester. But there's something wrong when we can't build a critical mass, because one is killed and another one starts, and it keeps going on like that. We need to have an explosion of them, and that's part of the responsibilities that we all have to do that. But I'll leave that there. That it is a progressive step. We'll see who's convening it. We'll see what the agenda is. We'll see who comes out to kind of like steerhold it, and how reparations is defined, because I've spoken about this in the past, the confusion, the conflation with compensation with reparations, which is something completely else. The next story is one that came through, which it's one of the things I love about this program. I'm always learning things that you just think to yourself, my God, we really are like a creative people. We do all these kind of different things, and it's such a shame that the representation we have of us in the media is so narrow. So the image here is of our sister Alicia Fuller Amar. She's a proud, what she calls herself, African mushroom farmer in Scotland. I think that's the mushroom farmer. I never really thought about that. She sold her former business as a proprietor for a destination wedding venue in Jamaica just before lockdown in 2019, and since then, she's been looking for a new business, a new endeavor, a new place to call home, and now she's in southwest Scotland, and she's got a 15-acre estate, and she cultivates an array of exquisite mushrooms. I mean, who knew? She taught herself how to grow it using the internet, and within 2 years of returning to the UK and having lived in Jamaica for a decade, she's produced these mushrooms and got admiration from food enthusiasts and dining establishments all over the world. So it's an amazing accomplishment. I don't know anything about like mushrooms to that degree, but it's a very interesting story, and I thought I'd share it. I'll put it in positive news. So unless you hate mushrooms, then perhaps it's not positive news, but I think it's a great story. The next is this is, by the time we've gone out, actually, I think the last session would have be almost concluding. Every year, Oleander and I try to attend this amazing open house from our brother Kenya and Ken McCalla, and his artistry is absolutely superb. And I don't know what to say, really. I mean, I was there last night. We had this amazing discussion. That's one of the good things. It's kind of like he turns his house into a gallery, like once a year. And so it's an open exhibition, and we discuss the art. His theme this year was musicians and animals. It's a really amazing thing. So he's put together these amazing images of famous African artists, and actually he's aligned them with a particular image. I don't want to say much more than that, but if you get an opportunity to check out his work, please do go and visit the YARA website, and if you want to go and see his work in situ, then just call him or email him to make an arrangement. It's definitely worth it, and it's definitely quality work that can adorn your living space. And if that sounds like an advert, it probably is, because he's a great guy, very humble brother, and talented. And I don't think we see enough of the works of our artists in public spaces. But yeah. The next story is the slide didn't change. That's a bizarre one. Let me try and see if I can do that. told you we've got some technical gremlins. So, there we go. So this is an award ceremony, which is about recognizing outstanding yet relatable professionals who are of African heritage and, would be considered role models. So this took place in Birmingham last week. It's called the Black Talent Awards, and it honors those who have not only just excelled in their chosen fields. That's one of the criteria. But what I like about it is that they've also got to have made some headway in wider social initiatives, things that help the community as well. And so that's what the awards is. The awards is in its second year. I haven't had the opportunity to go yet, but just thought I'd pick it up. Thank you for sharing. Let's see if it's going to change. Oh gosh, yes. This is it's a change on this one. This one's a bit of a fanboy thing, really. This week, a few days ago, I was fortunate enough to attend the book launch for the amazing, oh my God, Elmer Dixon. If I'm gushing, those of you who know me will know that the Black Panther movement is one of my favorite all-time liberation movements. And he was there on the front line. I mean, if you can see the image of his book and you remember that iconic image of our brothers with the berets and the shotguns outside Capitol Hill, he was the one at the front. And so we just had an amazing discussion. And I'm fanboying out here. It was just refreshing just to speak to someone who was there, who gets it, who's still got that fire, who's still trying to do the work, even though conditions have changed, politics have changed. He recognizes that we have to move in different ways. And we were talking about, we were talking to someone who, he's in the 70s, doesn't look it, but he's in the 70s. So, he knew George Jackson, he knew, no Kwame Ture. He knew these people. He talked about when the police did the raid on our brother, George Hampton. We discussed the film and how it's propaganda and the flaws and the lies. It was just an amazing discussion. It was an amazing talk. Lessons about moving forward. A lot of the histories in that book dies down, and you can pick it up. One of the things that I think I took away as well is that we sometimes forget how young and how brave the Black Panther movement was. He was 18 when he was in that photo, when he was part of that movement. He spoke about his brother was also part of the movement, and on Capitol Hill, he says that there's a shot where you can't see his brother's face because the rifle was actually in front of his face, and that's because their mum didn't know that they were going to be doing that, so she thought he was at school. These are young Africans that just knew they had to fight for our liberation, and we know what J. Edgar Hoover did. We know how the state responded. They would have been called terrorists. They were called the greatest threat to America at the time. They murdered many of our young people. He lost a lot of people, colleagues that were murdered. Anyway, like I said, I just wanted to share that with you. If you hear anything about him doing a tour again in the UK, I think he went off to France after the event. Please check it out. And I want to give a big thanks to our sister Victoria and Natasha for organising the event and hosting it. It was amazing. Another amazing event that I was blessed to attend with Sister Oleander actually was this groundation. I've not been getting much time to get out. Work's been pretty relentless, and I don't know how this happened. Somehow I just went straight from work, just on the train rather than cycling, and I was late because, of course, I'm traveling from one side of London to the complete opposite side. It was in what was it called? It was in Deptford. Was it Deptford? It was in Deptford. But I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad I went. It was soul food. It didn't have a narrative in the same way like a traditional play. It was a dance theatre. It was powerful. It was a collection of West African traditional dancers mixing it up with dances mixed with Jamaican folk dances. So it was a real Pan-African unity issue going there. So I can't explain it. It was just so spiritual. It was so rich. There's an amazing creative team behind it. Beverly Glenn, Doc Patton, Nikwati Award. if you get a chance, I think it's still running till November. If you get a chance to check it out, and sometimes you kind of want to feel home, but you don't want to deal with the toxic politics because that can make you depressed. You just need to be uplifted. Just go chill. It's something you can take. You like your mum, you can take your nan there, and just feel the vibe. Just feel it. It's a feeling. The drumming was superb. The dancing was superb. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It was good. I needed it. Where else are we? Okay. When you do need to kind of like know what we've done, I spoke pretty much about the fact that we often are unaware of our contribution to the UK, and also of those who have come before us doing the work. So I spoke about earlier about the train being named after our elder and now ancestor. Just a reminder that we have people like Nubian Jack doing some amazing work, but this is the English heritage unveiling a new blue pack to the amazing Claudia Jones in Vauxhall. In this particular case, it's a house that she lived in for nearly 4 years, which is really the longest place of settled residence for her. You should know the history of Claudia Jones. I think I've spoken about this time and time again, not only bringing in the West Indian Gazette, not only starting the idea of the carnival in King's Cross. I think Ronnie Lizette helped and took it to another level as well. But that's the foundations of the carnival. It's just important just to recognize that those who come before us and they did it, and we can do it, and we can learn from them, and we can build on them. The image on the side of the launch is that of our brother Tony Warner, and I think I spoke last week about the fact I went on a Black History Walks with him. It's a tour. It's an amazing tour, and the book he has an image of Claudia Jones on the front. Is essential, because this is a book that's used in schools now. It's an essential tool, essential resource for us to make sure we don't forget who we are. We don't forget the challenges that we face, and we don't forget that we have solved some of these things and what we did and how we solved it. So if you get a chance to go on a Black History Walk tour, please do so. If you get a chance to pick up one of those books or to go to one of the launches or one of the openings of a new plaque, please do so. Because we have to understand that if we don't do this, then what happens, the spaces that we live in just continuously erase our accomplishments. And then our children growing up, I spoke about what was happening to those, what was that term again? Bloomers, or the gen. I'm so rubbish with these terms, with those young people who are actually having to code switch at work. They feel they don't belong. They develop mental health issues, and we don't have an infrastructure of a large amount of therapists to help us. And then we do develop mental health issues, and then we do get situations like our elder from Jamaica who got stabbed. We don't know the details of that, and I shouldn't really say that, but stabbed in an alleged racist attack. This is all related. So yeah, I thought I'd share that. Almost done. I know this is good news, and so I'm going to try and keep it positive. And so this is the story here of our sister. Her name is, and please forgive me because you know how bad I am with pronunciation. Her name is Tuscania Sarah Fraser. And, this is, she won the Pride of Britain Award. And this is because she launched her own stylish, larger size footwear brand. And I kind of love those stories, right? Because at primary school, she used to have to hide her shoes. She felt ugly behind her school bag because, her feet weren't, or there was nothing wrong with her feet. The shoes that were available for her, weren't stylish because they deemed her feet as being, the wrong size. And many of us are familiar with this. I mean, this is a story on a domestic level. If you think about the story I shared about the COVID inquiry, where PPE equipment that's designed to save our lives still suffer from the same issue. So some of us are actually getting exposed to coronavirus. Then you realize how serious this is. But in this particular case, our sister actually set up her own business, her own brand. She was born in Hackney, perhaps, and she won this award. So just want to kind of commend her and recognize that these problems, we can't we can't wait for others to deal with them. Sometimes you just got to get up and say, you know what, rather than be scarred and traumatized and make that become something that prevents us from moving forward. We can and we are that change. And if today, anything that today's program should have done, it should have given you examples of many instances where we have been that change, where we have gone out into the world and we have actually made a difference despite the adversity, despite everyone saying things are impossible. The next story is on a similar line. This is, again, it's a mother. She saw her child kind of like being, saddened by the fact that they couldn't play with toys that reflected them. And so, despite being a business analyst, that was her background, she just decided, I'm going to start making toys that represent, African diversity. And that's what she did. She says, I was tired of not seeing African representation in toys and books, so I made my own. And there's a thing in that interview where she says that there's an image of, she remembers her child picking up one of the first books that she published when it had a picture of, of a father, the mother, and child, and the baby, and her child. When they saw that image, their eyes lit up, and it made it all worth it. And this reminds me of Sister Amage and her Sankofa project, the black dolls, the African dolls, event that she did every year. It's like, it's really important that we recognize that we're not just passive actors in life. We have agency. And even though it's difficult and challenging and it requires us to support these entrepreneurs, we can do it, and we have, and we continue to do so. Okay.
Toyin, I have a comment from Shanti M. And they say, OTEP, Brother Toyin, Sister Oleander, and our global African family, giving thanks for your commitment and intellectual insights, respect, black heart, and a fist.
Love it. Thank you. And give thanks. And thank you for the encouragement. It's really appreciated, actually, because we never know who's out there. We don't know if everyone thinks like, our Toyin's just causing trouble. Much appreciated. Thank you. This is our brother, IC3 spoke about this earlier. This is actually a reparations conference that's taking place later on this month. It's organized by the APPG, that's an all-party parliamentary group on reparations. I hate acronyms, hate acronyms. It's bringing together campaigns, different institutions, individuals, all to discuss the topic of Ma'afa and actually the continued exploitation, the legacy of Ma'afa facing people of African heritage across the world. So this is a really big thing. I mean, the chair of the APPG is our wonderful sister, Belle Ribeiro Ade. She's an MP. I think she used to work as a secretary for our sister Diane Abbott, and now she's out there and she's just pushing it and making moves for us. And it's wonderful to see that. The APPG, so these all parliamentary party groups, they're actually informal groups. And I need to make this very clear. They're actually groups of members from both houses, so that any party who's interested, doesn't matter, they can come into this group and they can discuss and investigate these kind of issues, but they are informal. So the decisions they make don't have any legal weight. They don't change anything. What they do, they can raise awareness, they can set things in motion, but they are these they're discussion spaces. Now, as our brother said earlier, if he was listening, the conference, this particular conference, is going to be chaired or co-chaired with our sister Diane Abbott and also the son of the Right Honourable Marcus McGarvey. That's Julius Garvey, his son. It's going to be free to attend, and there's going to be a range of discussions throughout the 2 days. It's on a Saturday and a Sunday. I know I can't make it on a Saturday, but I will try and drop by on a Sunday. I think it's going to be at a friend's house in Euston. So you will need to register to attend. So go to their website. Silly me, I didn't put the website on there, but if you type in one of these phrases, UK Reparations Conference, it should come up. Go to the website and attend. It should be interesting. Now, that's the good side. I'm going to now give you Toyin the Nerdy, giving you just a little heads up to be mindful of. The reason why the image has both the conference and those engaged in the group is because we also have to remember that there's a general election coming. And when there's a general election, and I'm not talking about our sister Bell at all, but when there's a general election, and those in the images, politicians tend to find topics that are of interest to those that they can't reach when it comes to securing electoral votes. And reparations is one of the most it touches us on a level, and so we will be engaged. And so my yardstick is, of course, attend. Of course, if you're interested, feedback and learn from and feel engaged and feel positive that actually at least we're moving forward baby steps at a time. But recognize that there are also those politicians that are using this as a stepping stone to secure our vote, and that if they were silent on the issue of reparations yesteryear, then after the conference and after the election, they'll continue to be silent. So it's like I'm just trying to say, dampen your hopes and just be pragmatic in your thinking. It's good to engage, but these are politicians. And, of course, not all politicians are cut with the same cloth, but some of them who look like you and I, I'm not going to name them today because, I want to wrap up the program on a positive, but just be mindful. Okay. And, we're wrapping up. This is it's a penultimate slide, I think. This is a story about an exhibition that's taking place in Bradford, and I just thought this was so cool. But then I would do. This is the Bradford. It's organised by the Bradford Trapezium's Arts Gallery, and it's an exhibition called the Black Agenda Bookshop. And essentially, it's the first Afrocentric bookshop and library in Bradford. It's an exhibition kind of like showing and talking about this. And they ran from 1991 to 1997. The exhibitionists just want to pay tribute to their enduring legacy, because the African bookshop, or what people call the Black Bookshop, is a unique institution in our community. I know that much of my consciousness came from just those reasoning sessions that we used to have in those spaces. In Hackney, we had Mariffa Book, we had Centre Prize, we had what was the one in Bradbury Street? Oh my God, I can't believe my brain's gone. Anyway, that's going to really irritate me now. It's gone. The bookshops are where we pick up our knowledge. It's where we meet kindred folk. It's where we grow. It's where Saturday school sometimes took place. And in Hackney, we have none left now. It was Mariffa Bookshops and Muwata Bookshops. That's it. So those three. They're all gone now. So if you walk around Hackney, there are no African bookshops. There are shops that sell African literature, but there are no books that continue that tradition. So I think it's really great that in Bradford, there's actually an exhibition celebrating that culture, and hopefully giving people the mind to bring it back. Because in that particular bookshop, one thing you had to remember is that I say you remember, you might not have known this, but it was run entirely by volunteers. And they did so in the face of government indifference and often, acts of sheer hostility. I'm talking about racism from the state as well as from the public. So this is a good exhibition, and it really, it's one of those things that I wish it was in London so I could travel down there, maybe easily. But it also put something in my mind as well, and I'll put this out into the universe as I always do. If anyone wants to do something like this in Hackney, but rather than as a bookshop, but as a free library, then please get in touch. If you've got the time, because I never have time, that's my biggest shame. If you have the time to volunteer to actually, kind of have a little space and just kind of like serve drinks and let people read and just chill out and stuff like that in Hackney, then let's see that. But it really means you've got to be committed. That's the thing. This bookshop, the volunteers were working there full time. They're committed, and I know how difficult that is, especially in a cost of living crisis. But like we can bring this culture back, and it's great. There's an exhibition out there that's going to do that.
Toyin, I just wanted to say that although Moata Books and Centerprise are no longer physical. They do have books online, and do, yeah, and they also do attend certain events with their books as well. I just wanted to say
No,
that.
thank you. That's so important. Yeah, because I keep focusing on the bricks and mortar, because so you can still engage with the proprietors and the pioneers by going to community events, and you can still keep that spirit alive by just purchasing from them when you see them, etc. Because yes, Moata has a bookstore. Often we see Centerprise at big community events as well. So there's always that opportunity to be there. So thank you, Sister Oleander, for reminding me of that. But I'm still gutted about the lack of a physical space.
Yeah.
That's something that really hurts me. And we need that back. We need a space where we can just coach and learn and reason in a safe environment. And and it's our repository. It just seems ridiculous that in London that we just don't have those spaces anymore. And but like I said, anyone who wants to do that in Hackney and has got the time and is committed and is trustworthy, I'd like to put together a little team and we'll just do it. We'll create not a bookshop. I'm not really interested in the financial side of it. I'm interested in creating the space and the reasoning for people to kind of like learn together.
Yeah. There's a message from Black Lives Matter UK. Bring this culture back. Free library, physical space.
Give thanks. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. That's what I want to do. But it comes down to us. If we're going to learn from what happened in Bradford, the volunteers did it. They understood that there was no money. They understood it was what was needed, and and they ran it for best part of a decade. And I think we need to do that everywhere. So yeah.
I'm there.
On that note, we're done. Thank you for putting up with my ramblings and the technical issues. I know I've been looking over there. It's because the slides aren't moving, so I'm having to click and stuff. But hopefully, it didn't kind of like put you off too much, and you got the information through. See, I'm doing it again because I've completely forgotten the date of the next program. I think it's the 29th of October 2023, same time. I say 7. We are really aiming to come online at 7 and then finish by 8. That is the plan, and 8:30 is an exceptional times. I suppose because I spoke about the Israeli-Palestine part, that kind of extended me a little bit, and I have to be me. I have to say those things. It's triggering. I'm not okay when I think about that in a friend. But we're your program, we're your platform. We appreciate you being here. As usual, I want to say thanks to our researchers, certainly our brother Colin and other legality supporters in the community. Some of you are still making donations, and I know the legality newsletter hasn't been out for probably coming up to 9 months, if not even longer than that. The website is we were attacked. The SSL thing went down. I don't know what happened, but that's been repaired, so that will be back online. You should be able to access that. We do need to migrate it to a different system so we can start writing new articles. That's something. It's a capacity issue, but we ain't going to give up. We ain't going to forget. And those comments from all of you, they mean everything. And yeah. So, Sister Oleander, is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yes, the next program will be the 26th. Oh, no, not the 26th of November. Oh my God. The 29th, yeah. And also Black Lives Matter UK just commented, yes, it's something to think about. That's in relation to the library, etc.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to say thank you everybody for joining us, and those of you yet to see, thank you for viewing and listening. And yeah, stay safe and get ready for winter, because today was really cold.
You went out, didn't you? That's cool. Okay, well, on that note, just please in these times, be careful, be safe, be kind to one another. Global politics are going to get very ugly. Try not to allow yourself to be triggered. We know what oppression, we know what colonization feels like, we know what the legacy is like. like I said, be careful, be mindful, be safe, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us.
Ashe.
Ashe.